I built something I use. I use it almost every single day, at least at work. It's super useful, but it's super useful probably only for me. We usually have really good talks here, and maybe this will like tank the quality a bit because most people work on stuff that has to be used by other people. Since I'm the only one using this, let's just say that I'm okay with a bit of jank, but it's not that bad. All right. I want to ask how many people here work with databases, or at least connect to databases, stuff like that. All right, cool. So do I. Ours kind of, it's not bad, but it's pretty big and not also size, but like lots of tables, lots of connections. It's trying to model something that's annoying, and then I have to use SQL a lot. And I find it really annoying. Not because SQL is bad, I think it's very, very good, but it's so much stuff that you have to write, and I'm very, very lazy. So you have stuff like this, super simple example, and it's only joining two tables. You can imagine it gets way, way more complex than this, and I don't care. Like, this is what I care about, right? This is like, this is why we should have machine learning, but we don't even need that. So I want to show you guys what the tool does, because it's going to be easier than to explain it. This is Vim. For example, if I hit escape twice, it should, you can't see it on the screen because it's so small now, but it tells you like to quit Vim, you have to hit :Q. Yeah, it's an ancient editor, but I have it set up so it calls the project I worked on. So I've loaded an example database I found off the internet. I'm not that familiar with it. I just looked at it earlier today. And I know there's going to be one bug. If we hit one of the tables, it's going to crash or something. But I hope we don't hit it. So this is what my tool does. I hit Control PP, and then it shows me the query it generated from this thing, and then the data. And it's kind of annoying like this. Of course, I can also do Control LL. Of course, everyone saw that coming. And then it's a bit easier to read. Let's call this like the easiest thing you can do. But I can also do something like, give me employee 102. And then, well, this is, yeah, you can see it only brought me down. So this is like a shorthand for using the primary key. And it's the same as this. It brought the, trust me, it's hard to see here, but it did the same thing again. Of course, I can also do, let's say, last name equals Murphy. Let's see how many Murphys we have. On no column, Murphy. Ooh. Of course not, because it's supposed to be this. We just have one. Okay, let's see some other employees. Let's see, oops. If we can find some employee that has multiple names. Mary, Peterson, and Leslie. There's two Leslies, okay. And then we said last name equals Leslie.
Is it first name?
Was it first name? Okay.
Maybe.
Let's try it out.
I'm not sure.
Oh, it was first name. Yeah, okay, so we have to, it's kind of ugly. Let's clean it up a bit. Let's say I only care about their employee number. And the last, well, we know for first name, so let's grab the last name. Actually, this is wrong. So there's this pipe character and then what I call filters, and this one is select, but I use the shorthand for it because I'm lazy. And of course, it does exactly what you expect. Let's say you want to see what fields are available. You do this, you get the fields. You can also just see what are foreign keys, like what other data can you get. So let's see in which offices the Leslies work in. So if I just write offices like this without the column at the end, it's not a filter, it's kind of a shorthand for join. And ooh, that's pretty ugly. Let's see, I want the, select the city
Can I
and
ask,
their phone number. Yeah.
does it know that it's a join because offices is another, the name of another table?
It knows it's a join because it looked at the foreign key specification in the database.
Okay.
Yeah, so it analyzed the entire database, it mapped out all the foreign keys and relationships, and now I can just do this. And it's also why I have to cut this down because it's a bit long, but it's also why I can just show all of the other relationships. So like, yeah, you can get other employees, offices, customers, and it's actually also this relationship is the inverse of this. Yeah. You can also do stuff like,
Did you get the foreign keys list because you added the pipe and then nothing else?
I got the foreign key list because the program just analyzes the database. Yeah. And it's not something that happened when I hit any of the key bindings. I just ran the analysis part before. Yeah. You can also do stuff like group by, I don't know, maybe we can just see employees group by last name and then select their first name. I don't know, like max ID, whatever. It's it's employee number. Yeah, you kind of get the gist. This is what I wrote. And if you work with a large database, it's so much easier to write this than this, or if you want, you can really go as deep as you want. Trust, what the fuck? Oh, I have caps lock on. Vim. It's a pain in the ass to write this by hand, right? And then another cool thing is like you basically always build on top of what you wrote previously. So this is the thing I wrote. It just takes a syntax. Actually, I didn't come up with the syntax. It's a friend of mine who did. He wrote his version in Clojure, which I found horrible to work with, so I rewrote it in Rust. I'm one of those guys. So it takes stuff like that. It gives me the results. I use Vim just as a wrap around it to have a better user experience. What the application actually does is just take input from the command line parameters and then spit out some output. Yeah, so I don't really want to talk about the tool itself because meh. But what I do want to talk about is what working on it is like. And I hope the people who are newer to Rust or who do not know Rust at all kind of find this a bit more interesting. The rest of us who have played around with it for a while, I think we know these things. And I want to tell you like what's it like to work on it. What are the good parts? I want to talk about errors a bit, and then I want to talk about what I use to create the small language that we have in there, and how easy it is. And I think a lot of things could be easy when you can create your own language. And I'm also going to talk about adding it to Vim. Like, if you're marginally familiar with Vim, this makes it very easy to add stuff to it. Right. So what's it like to work on a code base? It's actually pretty easy. You fix compiler errors and it works. 90% of the time it works 50% of the time. But yeah, that's kind of it. I want to show like a quick hands-on demo maybe. Like, will it actually show? Yeah, so now it's compiling. And let's say I want to add the group by MySQL statement, whatever it's called. Like if I add something like this, you just get a whole, oh, what? 9. You just get compiler errors. And let me make this bigger. It's actually telling you your group by is not covered here. it didn't look at my comment. I can just delete this, and the compiler error is going to be exactly the same. It's just telling this is not covered here. And you can just, sometimes you can even like copy paste the group by directly from here. Like, let's see what happens. If I just copy paste it and I don't really put anything after it. Because of course, like this is expecting a string here, right? So it's gonna tell me that, what? Expected one of, oh, it's telling me what's there. I don't care. So you can, for example, group by, I've already defined it. I mean, this isn't new. It just has some data and I can just capture it and just use it if I want to. Now this function I mainly use for debugging, and I don't care what the data is inside of it, so it's group by, and you can see even it's the same line, it's the same as before. And then I get a new compiler error. Wait, and it's telling me the same thing, like group by isn't treated here. I mean, I forgot in how many places I changed it for this demo. Apparently 2. So, but it's basically like that. Like at one point in the this whole thing, I have this function that at one point you get to implement, and then you just do output, and it works. So this is what I mean by fixing compiler error until it works, and it is basically that. If you come from a language like any of the loosely typed languages, Python, JavaScript, PHP, it's annoying to go back to those. All right. One of the cool things that is, I think, easier to work with in Rust is errors. Genuinely, they are better thought out than what I'm used to in other languages. This is an error because there's not supposed to be a what? My screen is behind. What the fuck? Okay, now they're synced. Okay, this is an error because there's not supposed to be a comma there. And it's telling me, hey, either put and the input, show neighbors, a filter, whatever. I didn't write this part. This came out of the box from the library I used. And we will come back to basically, I'll come back to that. Yeah, and I'll show exactly this image before. Now, the errors are awesome because they are genuinely easy to work with. There's lots of places where I have question marks in the code base. Like the first 2 lines in this function. What those mean is it takes the result type of the, in this case, the parse and the build functions, and it translates it to the result type of the function you're calling them from. So those other 2 functions both have a similar result, and if you're not familiar with the result, it's kind of like you can either have a success value, whatever it is. In my case, I guess it's nothing in this example, or you could have an error, like let's say a syntax error. You could, let's say you can have a success value that's a query, or an error that's could not connect to your database. You basically write stuff like this. This is implementing the from trait for Pine error from syntax error. Pine error is an error type I created. Syntax error, in this case, it's an error type from a library I use. Should I make this larger? I'm not even sure I can. But yeah, it's stuff like this gets automatically called behind the scenes when you just use the question mark sign. Like in other languages, you would have to, if something is an error, return a different error and stuff. And here you just don't care. Like genuinely, I made an update to this library, to this application today, and I used these things. I had no idea what the errors were, but I knew they were treated correctly because I wrote stuff like this, and then you don't have to care about it. So yeah, errors are awesome. First, you just implement from whatever errors you have, from whatever errors your libraries have to your error. Then you just implement display for your error. Display tells Rust how to render your error to string, if that's what your application does. If it renders to HTML, then you do you. Then you just print it, and that's it. Like, this is all you do. And for me, it's no more cognitive load. I don't have to care what's going on beneath me, because at one point I just wrote this code, and then it magically happens for me. Yeah, now I'm getting to the library I mentioned. Pest is, they call themselves the elegant parser. It's just a way to define your own language. And this is kind of like a small example, which is the gist of it. Of course, you can also have like operator equals followed by question mark, whatever. You can literally do almost anything you want. And once it parsed, you get something like this.
We are not seeing it.
What? Oh, come on. What the fuck?
Do you have animations?
Yeah, I do have animations, but why are they playing? All right. This is what Pest gets you. And all of that structure code is generated at compile time. And I mean like the types. And you do get type checking for them, of course, and stuff like that. I find it super nice to work with. And the errors you get from it also implement display. So like this error I showed earlier is the display, is how Pest renders your errors if you want to. And for comparison, my friend who had, when you did this, I thought it wasn't on the screen. My friend who wrote it in Clojure, he had like 100 lines of stack traces and then undefined something. Like, thank you. That's very useful. And of course, you can also implement this yourself. Honestly, implementing display is super easy, so like, go for it. Questions? I can actually also show the syntax. Yeah, because that was kind of like Pest. Yeah, this is what it actually looks like. And it's, I'm not going to explain it. Just look into it. It's easy and fun. All right. The last thing I want to touch on is how to add stuff like this to Vim. You're not going to use anything that's not ergonomic. So if you write something that does some cool processing, but there's no way to, like, whatever editor you use or whatever tools you use, if you can't call it from there, you're not going to use it. And yeah, this is my way of doing it. What this means is on Control P, or Controller, Control N, just whatever is selected, send it to a script, and then put the output instead of whatever is selected. I replace what's selected with the output of the program, and then you just need a bit of more, like instead of sending your selection as a parameter, like what I expected, it just sends it to standard input. So you have to get that, then you have to get your query. I get my query by running a program on it, and then I use MySQL to just run the query, and I output it. So that's kind of it. Yep, and that's it. Any questions? Thanks.
Is this just for sort of viewing and querying databases, or can it also write in any way?
My friend's version is more advanced, so he can actually write. He has, I think, you have like employees, pipe, set, and then you can actually write and modify it. Since I'm only using this myself, I just care about my own use cases. Yeah, and whatever bug, I know of a couple of bugs, and if I don't encounter them, like, whatever. Yeah.
You said your friend wrote the grammar for the language for you. Does that, did that make
take it so you never had any problems with pest not being backtracking, being an L1 parser?
I did have problems with that, and they were super annoying. Yeah. Pest actually they give you a playground to test around it, but he didn't write my grammar. He came out with like I can just have this with pipes and do stuff like that. Of course, since he wrote it in a completely different language, he'd had his own, I forgot what the notation he used was called, and yeah, it was different, of course. Yeah, and you had
Did you have any interesting workarounds that you had to do, or did you have to cut the grammar to make it work?
No. Actually, it was even nicer than his. He had a lot of problems getting strings to work because, I mean, strings are, no, what I mean by string, like quoted strings. Like you have a value that has to be a quoted string. And in PEST, that was kind of like a thing they had built in. Like if you want a quoted string, just do this.
I had to drop PEST at some point.
Yeah, it's pretty good. It's pretty good.
It is good when your language is not complicated.
Honestly, and it's also nice the errors you get from it. So, yeah.
Like, what about different SQL versions? Like, does it work with everything, or is it like only for Postgres? Or how
It works exclusively with MySQL, and I wrote it in like the analyzer part of it has as a trait that you can implement for different databases, and then once you have the read from the different databases, you can also implement a renderer for different databases, and you could do that. Yeah.
Can you go back to one of the first slides where you showed some code?
Probably this one or this one.
That one.
Yeah.
Why all the, is it lifetime annotations we have?
Yes.
Why is that needed?
Because I have multiple intermediate representations, and this one I think is the first one that comes from that gets translated from PEST, and it actually contains string references that point to the original input. So it's all references here. At one point in a later representation, I actually have to turn those into owned strings. But let's see. If I go deep enough, I will find strings. Yeah. So that's why. And then if you have a type in Rust and you use a reference, you have to give it a lifetime, an explicit lifetime. Correct me if I'm wrong, unless a compiler update recently changed this. But as far as I know, it's still true. Yeah.
So this seems like a very cool DSL. It reminds me a little bit about JQ or something like that.
Yeah.
Because of the composition operator.
Yeah.
Was this the most advanced grammar that you have made a parser for in Rust, or have you done other stuff?
It's the most advanced grammar I've done in Rust.
Then in that case, how do you feel that learning, let's say, pests for the purpose of doing that, or did you have a few steps up for that, or? Like
I did similar stuff in college, so I was kind of used to it.
Is pest a parser company library, or is that this looks a bit more like
EBNF.
It's similar to EBNF,
okay.
but it's not actually.
Oh, so
Yeah.
it's like a separate file.
Yeah, this is a separate file.
To Rust code or what?
Yeah, yeah. I don't think I can show it in this view. I honestly forgot how I include it.
Okay.
Yeah, but I probably have a main RS function, and then it probably has some. Yeah, I don't remember how I. It's in the documentation.
Was this your first kind of choice of library, or did you try another one and then switch to this one? Or?
I tried another one. This was a couple of years ago, so I don't remember which one. And it had. There's one thing with PEST that I don't know why they did it that way. I think it's somewhere here. Yeah. So when you're matching what they call the rule, they actually have I think it's either a private or something like that, enum variant that you cannot put here. And they did it so you're forced to write this line at the end. That's the catch-all. And I hate this because if I modify my pest file and do something like this, I don't know, I would want a compiler error because I'm not treating it in here. But I don't get one because I have the catch-all.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So that's something I don't like about pest. But maybe, I don't know, like maybe you can turn it off or something. Yeah.
Can you scroll through the file a little bit?
Yeah.
Just curious how,
Yeah. I think I can actually make the font smaller. So, or maybe I can't because I don't know the keybind. Fuck. Does anyone know how to make font smaller on this thing? No. Actually, like view, okay. No, I don't know how to make it, but it's basically like this.
yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I was more just curious if it was like, you know, like Yak, where you sort of intermingle like actual code and
No.
grammar file, but it looks like it's just
No.
purely like.
This is their own syntax, and you, as far as I know, you can't embed any code in it.
You just get a dynamic syntax tree.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Isn't it part of your build RS? Isn't this interpreted by to generate some Rust?
That's exactly how it works. So it generates the structure and stuff, and if I...
I think it even generates the parser specifically.
yes, exactly.
So it doesn't interpret.
Oh, in that case, in that sense, yeah. So it's not, it's not dynamic in the way you meant. I'm sorry about that. What did I want to show? Like over here, if I add rule and just make something up, whatever. Like it's gonna compile here. Let's see this. This will not compile because it knows this does not exist. All right, thank you very much.